listeners, welcome. I am Andrew Kahn, the University of Michigan men's basketball beat writer for MLive. I'm joined by my Michigan State counterpart, Kyle Austin, and this is take two for this Michigan State men's basketball preview. And I don't mean that in that it's the second matchup of the season, but rather just the second try. The first game scheduled for January 8th in Ann Arbor was not officially canceled until that morning due to Michigan's COVID issues, but the Wolverines are healthy, the Spartans are healthy, and barring something unforeseen in the next 48 hours, which is certainly possible, we'll play this game this time in East Lansing. So Kyle, welcome. And I guess, the first thing is, if you can kind of tell us what the Spartans, kind of have looked like lately. I know they're coming off a 1-point loss at Illinois, but that's certainly a respectable loss. They won the game before that in Madison. And then lost before that. So it's kind of been a little bit of up and down, but how have they looked up close and personal recently?
Probably a little shakier than the last time we talked and we looked into it. I think they won seven or so in a row at that point, and we're feeling pretty good. They hadn't really played anybody, but we're playing some pretty good basketball overall. And now, as you mentioned, they've lost 2 of 3. I don't think it's anything to be too up in arms about. This is a good league. They were going to take losses. Northwestern at home, probably not a great loss. We saw Michigan, Northwestern plays everybody close, but Michigan State is the only team they've beaten, and we saw Michigan sneak by them last night at Chrysler. So not a great loss there. And on its face, a 1-point loss at Illinois there's no shame in it, but Illinois is playing without Kofi Coburn and without Andre Curbelo. So I think that's a game that they felt like they could have had. And, a lot of the same issues. They still turn the ball over a lot. They had 9 in the first half against Illinois. They had 17 total for the game at home against Northwestern. So they've been doing it a lot early in games and putting themselves in a hole. It was 14 points. They went down 8-0 early at Wisconsin. So they're kind of coming out disjointed, throwing the ball away, and then a lot of times they've been able to dig themselves out of it with their offense. They've had a lot of games where they're just shooting it very well. They have a lot of different weapons on offense. They had, I think, the Big Ten's best shooting percentage for a while. They might have dropped slightly below Michigan, actually, now, at least in conference play. But they've been able to kind of get their way out of it with their offense a lot of times, which is what they did against Wisconsin. But sometimes they can't. And if the teams are, they're getting into the heart of Big Ten play, they're facing tougher defenses, teams that have them scouted better, I think, than a lot of non-conference opponents did. And they've struggled to keep some of those offensive numbers up. So a little shaky now. I mean, they're still one of many 2-loss teams in the Big Ten. They're right up there at the top. They're better overall than we thought they would be, but maybe not feeling quite as good as a couple weeks ago last time we talked.
And it's a complete opposite story for Michigan. Had this game been played, the first time it was originally scheduled, Michigan was on a 2-game losing streak. They had problems on both ends of the floor. And obviously, it looked like they were going to maybe be a little shorthanded in that game. Now, of course, that's what ultimately postponed the game, is that they were so shorthanded they didn't meet the scholarship minimum to play the game. But since then, Michigan has been a different team. They went to Illinois, were shorthanded, didn't have Hunter Dickinson, their leading scorer and rebounder in that game, as well as some others. And they played Illinois tough. I mean, in the end, it was a 15-point loss, and they only scored 53 points. But the defensive effort was there. Undersized and undermanned. They fought hard, which, again, Michigan assistant Phil Martelli made a great point afterwards, saying, when the opposing team and opposing coaches say you played really hard, that really means that you just didn't play well enough from a basketball standpoint. So, playing hard is great, but it's kind of expected. You don't say that about good teams because, they're playing hard, but they're also making shots and doing some other things. So point taken there. But Michigan has built on that. They've now won 3 in a row. They beat Maryland at home by 19. They won at Indiana by 18. And then, Kyle, as you mentioned just last night, Wednesday, they snuck past Northwestern with a late surge in that game to win by 2. So suddenly they're on a 3-game win streak. The offense in particular has turned it around. The shots are falling. Caleb Houston has really caught fire, these last 3 games, and we'll talk about him more. I know we got a question in advance about that, and feel free to put your questions in the chat here as well. But yeah, so Michigan is feeling much better about itself coming into this game.
Yeah, we'll talk about that matchup. I think number one in matchups I'm looking forward is at center. Because I haven't watched a ton of Michigan. My sense is that Hunter Dickinson is playing the way that they expected him to play, kind of at an All-American, All Big Ten, certainly type of level. And Michigan State, very strangely, has not really been tested with an elite center, I don't think, because they've had this strange run of key guys being out when they play them. They play Northwestern at home. Pete Nance couldn't go in that game, had an ankle injury. And then, you play Wisconsin. They don't really have a strong center. And then you look in, you think, okay, here's Kofi, let's see the big matchup. And then Kofi's out, with concussion protocols. And yet somehow they lose both of those teams, oddly. But it's, I think we talked about this last time. It's, can Marcus Bingham, defend against him? He's going to give up strength. He's going to give up pounds. But I know Michigan State's hope on the defensive end is that he'll be able to use his length to kind of bother him, to disrupt entry passes into there, to contest shots, not get shot over. But, we've also seen Marcus Bingham at times foul. We've seen him at times kind of just get pushed around on the defensive end. So it's going to be a kind of, for Michigan State fans, it's going to be has Marcus Bingham grown up moment. And I'm sure they'll use doubles and they'll use digs from guards and stuff. It won't just be Marcus Bingham. But that's the one thing I'm looking for, because if he plays kind of the way we've seen him sometimes in these big matchups, it could be a big game for Hunter Dickinson, and then that won't be a good outcome for Michigan State.
Yeah, so it's been interesting these last few games. You're absolutely right. Dickinson has looked very much like the All-American that people thought he could be entering, his sophomore season. And to an extent, all three teams have thrown a double team at him lately. So, Maryland did it, and he still made 10 of 14 shots and also had a career-high 6 assists. And a lot of those led to threes. Michigan made 8 of them. The next game, Indiana, They did it, but they admittedly kind of botched it as far as how they were
in Indiana. No,
what they were coached to do and what they actually did. They kind of let him just face up, see the double team coming, and pass out of it. So Michigan hit 11 threes in that game, but Dickinson also feasted. Made 9 shots, including 3 threes himself. So that was kind of a disaster for Indiana, as Michigan scored 80 points. Northwestern, it was a combination. It kind of depended who was in the game, but they didn't have to deal with Hunter Dickinson all that much. In the end, he played 29 minutes, but it was disjointed because of foul trouble. He didn't play down the stretch because he fouled out. So that was maybe not the best indicator of how, whatever Northwestern wanted to do with Dickinson, but they did limit him, especially in the second half. He only finished with 9 points and 2 assists. So yeah, that's always the fun matchup.
And I can take a pretty good guess about how Tom Izzo is going to approach that, because his general philosophy has been, I'd rather give up the 2 than the 3. When we talked last time, Michigan was not hitting its 3-pointers, but now it seems like they are. And you've got a real threat of him, if you double him passing out, finding an open shooter, and giving up a 3 instead of a 2. So in similar situations like this before, Izzo has said, I'm going to mostly single team, maybe get a dig from a guard, not a true double team, but like a dig here and there, and maybe let him get 20 points. But if you can make them shoot a poor percentage from 3-point range, and Marcus Bingham can do okay, that's going to be my guess as to what they do on Saturday.
I think that's smart. Let's talk about the point guard matchup, because they both have grad transfer point guards from smaller schools. Michigan with Devontae Jones, and Michigan State with Tyson Walker. But I know that's not the only point guard that plays for Michigan State. Yeah, I guess kind of what has Walker and the other guy brought to
Hogard, AJ Hogard.
Okay, I want to make sure I pronounced it right.
Yeah, a 1-2 punch, and kind of different guards, different styles. Walker is quicker. He runs their fast break better. He's the better shooter of the 2. Hogard is bigger, kind of a tougher defender, can kind of get into the lane a little bit more and bang around and get baskets there. He's probably the better passer too, although he's had his issues, and he's a good defender. So kind of different different styles of play, and they're kind of going different directions. Tyson Walker, I think, it's an adjustment playing in the Big Ten, and going from, he was at Northeastern, the Colonial Athletic Association, getting used to the Big Ten where teams have a good scout on you, teams are physical. He maybe hasn't had the best 2 or 3 games, had a decent second half against Wisconsin, but, he's turning over sometimes. He's a guy that seems like can let a turnover or two kind of get to his head and get thrown off his game. AJ Hogard is kind of picked up the slack there, but it's really kind of a guessing game any night as to who's going to be the guy. I mean, there's times when Tyson Walker's finished out close games and been the guy. There's times when AJ Hogard's done it. So probably Hogard on a little better trajectory right now, but you could really see the end of the other two. And part of it could be who they feel like matches up better against Devontae Jones, because they've got kind of 2 different looks they can give.
And Jones is just another example of a guy who's playing much better now than he was the last time we previewed this game. He's hitting now 46% from 3, limited attempts, 33 so far. But distributing the ball, he made free throws down the stretch last night. Still kind of a careless turnover here or there and a silly foul, but overall he's been pretty good. He makes tough shots at the rim. He's a pass first point guard who can score, and he's a good defender. So he's been much closer to the Jones that they thought they were getting, a little closer to the production that they got from Mike Smith, in a similar role last year. And that's been key to Michigan's kind of surge here lately. Another, as I alluded to earlier, is Caleb Houston, 5-star freshman, top 10 player in the class. A starter from day one. And he was struggling. He was in a 2 for 21 shooting slump from 3-point range over 5 games. And he has absolutely turned it around. Starting with Michigan's win streak, he makes 3 or 4 from deep against Maryland, 5 of 7 against Indiana, and 3 of 5 last night. And he's scoring from inside the arc too. So this is now 16, 19, and 18-point game for him, and he's just been lights out, and that's been huge for Michigan team that has really needed that outside shooting. And I know we got a question on Twitter before this about the matchup between him and Michigan State's freshman Max Christie. I mean, does it seem like they probably guard each other based on kind of matchups?
I was just looking at that. I'm going to guess that they put Michigan State at least puts Gabe Brown on Caleb Houston. Okay. Pretty similar size, and Michigan is going to be smaller there. They got Eli Brooks 6'1" at shooting guard, and Michigan State's got 6'5" Max Christie. So it's going to be, can Max Christie guard a smaller guy, which I think he can. Out of those 2 guys, I think you're going to want Max Christie in that matchup. So I'm not, I don't think Michigan State will match up defensively, but it is interesting because it is 2 freshmen, and Max Christie has had a pretty typical freshman season where he's had games where he's really feeling it. I think he's probably their most talented player and probably has the most upside, but like you just mentioned with Houston, thrown in, played basically 30 minutes a game from day one, and you're gonna get what you think you're gonna get with that. You're gonna get good games, you're gonna get bad games. He was 1 for 8 at Illinois. Illinois fans were giving him an earful just because he's an in-state kid there. He's a suburban Chicago kid, so I think that got to him. And it'll be the first rivalry matchup, but we've certainly seen games where he can hit 3-4 3-pointers, really standout shooter. And we've seen flashes of kind of the athleticism, get to the hoop, a putback dunk or something here and there. Not a ton of that. But he's a dangerous offensive player. He's been very streaky lately, but I'll be curious to see how he does in this. But I think they'll put Gabe Brown on Caleb Houston, at least defensively.
Yeah, and I mean, Michigan, they'll use Eli. Eli Brooks will guard who they feel is the best, most dangerous offensive player on the perimeter. So, within reason, he's not guarding the opposing team's center ever, but whoever is that perimeter player who they feel is the best, that's who he'll guard. Now, Gabe Brown, that seems a bit of a stretch to maybe make him guard that, and then that creates some problems for some of the other guys. So you think it might be Brooks guarding Christie too on that.
And they're pretty close as far as like if you're picking a best player out of those 2. Yeah. There's not a clear-cut guy.
Mm-hmm. And then you've got the Brown Hauser kind of combo. That's who's starting for them recently, right? Hauser, or have they?
Yeah, Hauser's
Is
been
it?
starting all year, and that's an interesting one too because you talk about a size disparity. Diabate
Mhm.
has several inches on those guys, but I know Michigan State's they feel like maybe they can be a little bit quicker than him and get
Right.
around him too. So
Right, and in some
mismatch there,
cases, trade 3 for 2.
right?
So yeah, that's really what it is. I mean, Michigan's bench is kind of not a revolving door, but it does change from game to game. I mean, Howard usually likes to play 8 or 9 guys, but it's not always the same group. You can count on Frankie Collins, a freshman, getting some of the minutes for Jones at point guard, and Terrence Williams kind of filling in at various forward spots, and he's been instant offense off the bench at times this year. 10 first half points against Indiana when Michigan had guys on the bench in foul trouble. A big 3 late when they had a couple starters that had fouled out. And then other guys, it kind of just it does depend on the night. I mean, Brandon Johns, an East Lansing high school grad. At times he started at times for Michigan, but
Hmm.
like last night, he has a little bit of a slip up in the in the first half, no pun intended. He loses his shoe, and ends up kind of chucking it towards the bench, and
Hmm.
Juwan Howard then. He pulls him from the game late in the first half, and he didn't get back in. He
Oh,
did not play in the second half, including down the stretch when Michigan needed someone. They turned to a walk on, Jaron Falls, to play those minutes in the front court.
I saw that.
But yeah, so that's something to watch. But I don't know. As we kind of wrap this up, do you have a lean in this game? I'll start by just saying I kind of always lean towards the home team in
I
this
was going to
matchup,
say that
especially
too.
especially Big Ten games. And that's how it's gone. It's between Jawan and Izzo. They did play 2 times each of the last 2 seasons. Obviously, no
Hmm.
fans last year, but the home team has won each time, and that's been a surprise at times. I mean, Michigan, the Big Ten champs last year, and yet beat by a Michigan State team that was mediocre at best. On the last day of the regular season, and the year before, I think people would have given Michigan State the edge, and yet the
Hmm.
Wolverines pulled it out at Chrysler. So, yeah, I guess what some of the things are you looking for in this game?
You know, the good thing to say about Michigan State is that they are defending every game to give them good enough, well enough to give themselves a chance to win.
Okay.
Talk of opposing field goal percentage, opposing points per game, defensive efficiencies. They're right up there, and they've been consistent and really haven't had any lapses. They had a bit of a swoon with their rebounding, but seem to be over that. So they're not getting blown out by anybody, and they haven't played Purdue yet, or some of a lot of top end teams, and they probably will at some point. But their 2 losses are by 2 points and 1 point. Had some big wins, so I think they have a good foundation. And you add that to playing at home, like you said, they're going to be. I think there's going to be some matchups they can take advantage of, and this, I look at the 4, and, one guy I need to mention who I haven't yet is MLive Hall. You mentioned Michigan's bench. Michigan State's bench has been big. He's been, to me, the best player of the last 3 games coming off the bench. A guy that, when they really need someone to make buckets down the stretch, he's been the guy to do that. And when we mentioned him and Diabate, I remember asking him before the first time we thought they were going to play. He said, "Yeah, kind of size versus strength matchup, and they feel like maybe they can take advantage of that." So, they've lost 2 or 3. I still think, and Michigan, I certainly feel differently about this than I did the first matchup. But Michigan's playing better, but I still think Michigan State's playing well enough. They get any effort like they did at Wisconsin last Friday. I think they win. They win pretty well. Tom Izzo always gets his teams up for this game. They'll be defending, they'll be rebounding. So I like Michigan State in a close one, but like you said, pretty much playing at home. I mean, if they were playing in Ann Arbor, I might feel differently, but I would take Michigan State in a close one.
Yeah, as would I. I think Michigan's going to keep playing well. I don't think it comes to a crashing halt. I just think that Michigan State is another good team, and they just have the edge at home. And then for Michigan, they come back home and play Nebraska, try to get back on track there. Last thing is this potential this the makeup game that they have to
Yeah.
still fit into the schedule, and that both sides have told me that it's going to happen. It's a question of when. Interestingly enough, Michigan announced today its makeup date for the Purdue game, which was, scheduled after the Michigan State game, but has been rescheduled first. And if you were looking for kind of a gap where Michigan and Michigan State could fit this in, you don't necessarily need to find one, because there wasn't one for Michigan Purdue, but they just moved one of Purdue's games to fit it in. So they could do that for Michigan State. They could try to wait to see if, an opponent has a COVID issue and suddenly there's an opening, or, they could try to do it towards the end of the year, between February 27th and March 3rd. Michigan has games on those days, but not in between, and neither does Michigan State. Now, I guess you could say that's a little risky to wait that long, but that's a gap I see if they don't want to move a bunch of things around.
Yeah, and I can tell you for Michigan State, it's like, I know they will play the game if the Big Ten tells them to play the game, but I think there's also a sense of, we were ready to play the game, and frankly, they were ready to play the game when Michigan wasn't playing that well. So I'm not sure there's a ton of people in East Lansing that are super keen. I think there's a good chance Michigan's playing very well, at that point. And their NCAA tournament picture, they could be, just like Michigan State was last year, very much in need of a win to get into that. And the game will be in Ann Arbor. So I'm not sure anybody, they're not looking forward to the date as much as maybe we are. But, it's up to the Big Ten. Tom has always said that they want to play all 20. They'll do what the Big Ten instructs them to do. So, yeah, if I'm betting at this point, I'm guessing they squeeze it in there towards the end. And it could end up looking like a very different game than the one we were talking about that got canceled a couple weeks ago.
Absolutely. Well, we'll have continued coverage on MLive.com /Wolverines and /Spartans, including, some previews tomorrow, one that will touch on what this, what a win would mean for each team in this game, as well as post-game coverage from Breslin Center in East Lansing. For Kyle Austin, I'm Andrew Kahn. Thanks for watching.